I proszę Państwa, tym sposobem.
And ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving to the last presentation, which is going to be a presentation delivered by the CEO, Wojciech Majka, the CEO at Ecol. The title will be the specificity of nuclear energy, example of a project carried out by a Polish company in the context of technical and organizational requirements. Mr. President, I hope you were able to recover after yesterday's game, and now is the time for us to see your presentation. Please, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Director. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I did. I cooled down. Maybe this is not the moment to discuss that, but I'm pleased that I'm one of the speakers of today's event, because this is definitely closer to my heart than a football match, even though I'm always a fan of our players, and that's natural. I wanted to share with you several thoughts about our experiences in nuclear energy, because we have some considerable amount. I'm very pleased that we've been invited to this group and gremium, because we feel recognized in this sector, and we're hoping that we'll be one of the companies that will be able to deliver something, both during the construction phase and later operations. So Ecol Industrials, which is offering for Czech nuclear power plants a lot of services. Several slides about the company. I'm not going to make that presentation available to everyone. I won't go into too much detail. And then you'll have an opportunity to take a look at it. Ecol was established 30 years ago, exactly 3 weeks. We are going to have our anniversary, and in terms the diagnostic servicing and lubrication, everything where there's technical reliability required and for demanding clients. We're employing 350 individuals in various specialties. We're located in Poland and Czechia, in the US, and we're working globally from an operational standpoint. Wherever it's necessary for us to be present, there we are on the map of the world. We try to be certified in those areas which require that. That means that the process makes sense, so we try to concentrate on the main process of certification, so the triad of the environment, safety, and technical aspects, not only in Poland, ISA, but also petrochemical, German, pertaining to use of water, and other requirements on other markets where the client may have specific requirements pertaining to whether certification or authorizations. For example, the UDT in Poland, which for pressure parts and pressure equipment. This way, our philosophy is put forward, and we try to be up to date. We also try to be, not everything enters the market simultaneously. In those experiences that we gain from other markets, we try to also adapt to the Polish market, and therefore also ICML or VGB membership in those organizations. We also try to be in terms of outsourcing and a service that is based on maintaining operations, mainly in power plants and refineries, in process industry, but also in lighter, such as automotive and other automotive production. We are one of the largest oil diagnostics labs, and in Central and Eastern Europe, in terms of machine components, we're also doing chemical servicing and works pertaining to water, steam, chemical corrosions, or oil turbines is also one of the basic areas of activity that we are involved. So the delivery of oils for large turbine foam cleaning and other activities. So either new builds ready for startup in new oil installations as well as renovations of oil installations. That service is the first one which also appeared in the consciousness of nuclear power plant services. So their presence in those areas was from that springboard. And also the technology of cleaning water, which is also where we, in nuclear facilities, other forms of lubrications. Several slides what we're doing. I'm not going to discuss them. Just take a look at the presentation. And if you would like, you can also take a look at our website. So in terms of lubrication, turbo generators, and gas, steam units, we service and lubricate. Also, the integration of knowledge and on-site measurements, anything that is related to technologies 4.0. First, we develop them in our areas, and then we implement them commercially in the client. For example, RFID technology, samples and sampling, and the solutions which are related. So, for example, mobile services and mobile staff. We're also a partner to Lotos Oil, which is one of the leading for the energy sector, the suppliers. We also clean with water, high pressure water, special technologies for the energy sector, and then chemical services that I mentioned, with startups, with chemical regimes, oil lab, which we invite you to a virtual tour on our website where you can see our lab. And we're also involved in the diagnostics of lubricants, plastics, the ones that are more difficult to measure, more difficult to test, and also all of diagnostics. So also ultrasounds, thermovisions, and in terms of nuclear plants and power plants, we also the oil systems, cleaning oil systems, lubrication, diagnostics, and all kind of works related to the preparation of the installations. So flushing, etching, and other activities. Also dedicated technologies for steam generators, power steam generators. The specificity of nuclear energy is specific, to speak colloquially. Why? Because in Poland we don't have Polish companies which were not in that system, had to learn a lot and had to understand how to get into that sector and fulfill the expectations, various expectations of the clients. I mentioned the aspects of this specificity in nuclear appliance at various stages. First of all, we always ask ourselves how to approach and sell the services that we know from other sectors, for example, conventional energy, and translate that into nuclear energy. Of course, it's the specificity of the project, whether it's a primary or nuclear, secondary, whether it's under construction, whether it's a plant already started up in operations. What are the requirements, quality requirements, and organizational and staff requirements of the project, and how to prepare for such a project, how we realize it. So the entire logistics, the ideas, the scheduling, the engineering. A very important part is the question of safety and nuclear sector, and our experiences show that our experiences mainly are in the area of not construction, but already facilities in operation. This started in Temelin in Czechia, then in Dukovany, then southern Ukraine, several power plants, Russian Rostov or Bałatovo-Kalinic, then Slovak, And we're working in that cycle in those facilities. However, it all started in Temelin, so one of the newer, if you look at the map of Europe, and one requiring demanding technologically. So this is access to the how to sell it, to the factors of success for the sector and for the market. We know that the brand has to be well represented on the market. This is no coincidence, no accidents. It doesn't, the website and some brochure sent out or made available or a business card mail available somewhere at the conference. You have to build the brand in the sector. That's a strategic aspect. If the company is involved in that business, it has to look at it strategically and long term. Of course, the strength of the brand and experiences from other sectors is important, which can be convincing to some representative of the nuclear sector. Generally speaking, you have to specialize in something, have a good reputation. And this is the way it looked like. We were known in conventional, from various specialized services in the conventional sector. And then when a particular problem occurred in the nuclear area, we came in as an assistant or a black horse, basically, to a certain project, and we were able to realize it, but only because we had a very good note of trust from a conventional sector. Also, it's important to know large projects, large-scale projects. We not only had from nuclear, but from petrochemical, chemical, multi-sectoral projects, which we felt well in these large facilities, which are nuclear plants. So having a management system which is effective. Richard Everett from Rolls-Royce also mentioned this. In my opinion, you can't, in nuclear sector, without having a clearly developed, in terms of safety, management, security, in the nuclear sector. This requires certification, be available, disclose sensitive information. Sometimes we ask that the client is asking of something, I'm not going to tell them, reveal it, because they're going to use it against us. In some of the projects that we participate in the nuclear sector, there's no discussion. Either they're going to show us, we show them how we're going to do it, and with all NDA, of course there are NDAs that are signed and so on and so forth, or we don't enter the game. So the entire documentation process, flexibility and openness to the client is very important. Readiness to conduct test, experimental research, scientific is important. This is also something that we face. For example, Temelin in Diesel for a emergency electrical energy generator. This was relevant, but others pertained to steam generators. We had some of our own experiences. So the client also demanded test and qualified us as a supplier, not only as a company, but as a technology. As you probably know, nuclear energy is characterized by a lot of sectoral and regulations and industry regulations. So whether it's the organization of works, fulfilling safety, quality requirements, these projects are usually have more complexity and difficulty in terms of documentation, in terms more than conventional projects. So all processes in atomic nuclear energy have to be done with in advance enough, because no ad hoc usually approaches or activities are conducted which could have been handled in advance. So the first was our entrance in Temelin, and an important facility there, the reactor which we have in Temelin. So of Russian source, origin. They have fuel, diesel fuel driven, and then we were on that basis allowed to approach the more critical project. And then the specificity of the project. So whether is it in construction or is it in operation? And it is on the primary, nuclear, in the or secondary. Secondary loop or primary loop. So these areas differ also procedurally in requirements and also in terms of the work and staff employees. The preliminary and the secondary, generally there is a difference in comparison to conventional energy. Just recently in Machowce, we dealt with that, and these regimes are generated by the general contractor established. So there's no fuel on the unit yet at the stage that we were at. So this was not yet a nuclear plant. These regimes were more as in the case of conventional constructions, but of course far advanced. It's also very important who is the employer. Is it the actual power plant or a general contractor? With, for example, the renovation of a turbo set. So this is very important in the terms of the negotiations, scope of responsibilities, split of responsibilities, and other challenges that we deal with are local circumstances and conditions in the country where the power plant is located, because the nuclear laws, they differ slightly. The master shape or framework is similar, but a lot of effort has to be dedicated to fulfill the requirements and nuances, local nuances, which are more based on national regulations than corporate regulations. The formal aspect in terms of quality requirements and organizational and staff requirements, a lot of emphasis or area of our activity is being a qualified supplier as a vendor, not only as a company, which we go through various audits, which make it possible for us to be a nuclear supplier, a nuclear vendor, but also the appropriate staff of employees and staff who are authorized to conduct certain works. The audit on employees is conducted appropriately and mainly pertaining to the issues on not being penalized. There's their psychological health, physical health, interviews with sworn interpreters. They are considerably difficult. There are specific filters and sieves which they don't go through in typical sectors which we're working, for example, in the chemical or energy sectors. So I have to say that there are situations where employees do not pass these tests because the psychologist will not pass them through. Sometimes there are some formal issues. We also are not frequently given the reason why they did not pass the test. But also in terms of national regulations and operations, they don't really want to see employees of foreign staff from foreign countries. This could be broadly understood as, let's say, a potential of terrorism. So there's a big trend that what can be commissioned to local staff and local employees. For example, Ecol Industrial in Czechia, our company, those areas which are banned from Poles to carry out the work are handled by Czech staff. This is a difficult aspect. Something that is also new in this sector are issues related to dosing and working on a radiation generating units. Staff are afraid of that. Chernobyl and other stories do not assist us and help us in the fact that radiation is a normal process, and that also passports, dosimetric passports, and applying. This is a serious challenge, and it took a lot of time to convince or persuade these employees to go to a power plant. The Czech don't have that, or Ukrainians or Russians have that attitude. It's easier for them. They understand that. Poles are afraid even to come close to the subject matter. So, scheduling, backups, everything is planned. Formal requirements, those related to radiology. Those who are on the side of nuclear know here that all kinds of incidents, dosage levels are declared to the National Atomic Agency and are considered as under the light of nuclear power plants. Take those issues very seriously, and we need to proceed in line with these requirements. Another area is the preparation for project realization. From our experiences, we see that because we are working in power plants abroad, are language issues. Employees communicating with the local representatives, and also issues related to safety, evacuation, safety procedures. The team members or staff members know the language that is used in the Czech Republic. For example, in the Czech Republic, there has to be someone who speaks Czech, in Russia, Russian. So English as a binding language is not sufficient enough. Generally, European rules are binding. Ukraine, Russia, and other countries, there's also the question of logistics, of price, and it becomes more complicated. So time is the main risk factor. We also have to remember the loss with radioactive equipment. There were cases that certain elements of this equipment could not be decontaminated, and they remained in the power plant to the next use. That's why in the contracts, certain clauses that say that if who's going to pay in the event that certain equipment must stay. There's no shortcuts in power plants, generally speaking. Sometimes we can say that something can be handled here unofficially. In nuclear power plants, there's no such possibility. Therefore, the planning and project understanding, its planning is very, very important issue. So it's the experience of the employees. We respect the experience of those staff and employees, and they need to be an active participant of the teams. And in renovations, we're working a lot in renovations at nuclear power plants. Those time slots are very tight because usually they are related to the filling or exchange, replacement of fuel, and therefore time is priceless. In terms of safety, as I mentioned, safety is a priority issue, very serious issue. There are very high restrictions in terms of any kind of consumption of alcohol or other substances. For another case is testing blood tests of staff. When issuing before an entrance, there's urine and blood tests of staff. If anyone has any kind of traces of marijuana, narcotics, or drugs, they disqualify. This disqualifies them, so this stays in the body. It's not alcohol that they become sober in 2 days and they can go back to work. In terms of other illegal substances, there's no such possibility. And going on to moving around in a nuclear power plant, there are guides, there are zones, there are dams of different places, areas of no entry, so it's slightly different. In other words, going to the bathroom has to be reported, has to be noted, and the entire system of walking through the secured spaces is very tight. We know that in the machine hall there is a, let's say, appropriate security. When you go into a nuclear power plant, these are forts, and there's a lot of security, and sometimes people don't feel so well in such facilities. So the dosimetrics, as well as other digital measuring tools, and entering into the appropriate logs. We had a lot of resistance of our staff initially, who also wanted to have their own dosimetrics. If they're going to Chernobyl to their then they can take their own testing device. So we, in the power plants that we've been, we couldn't have our own, so we had to also put a lot of trust into the authorities of the power plant. Sometimes, if someone enters a power plant and there's something critical to conduct, sometimes there are pumps, sometimes there are some flushing equipment, measuring equipment. The client frequently says that there would be an excess of that equipment or devices, because because of procedures, bringing them in additionally is, so there always has to be spares. Whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or others in China, the requirements there are extreme. You have to have the best equipment. And also this pertains to the staff. The staff there has to be redundancies in place, reserves, especially now during the COVID period, but this really has to be the best of the best. Another strongly emphasized here in comparing our work to other conventional power plants are procedures of various cabling, lances, hoses, which we have. And because of the procedures of closed doors and dams, no one's going to drill a hole in order to pass through a cable. If that is the case, or that is the requirement, then it would require at least 6 months' time. The important thing is that certain doors not be shut behind us, but we have to also remember that and plan in advance appropriately. The SME, foreign materials exclusion, are not only pertaining to sectors and managing order in the facility, that all undesired equipment and material have to be identifiable. Therefore, nothing can stay which is not part of the installation or the power plant. So all of our equipment, as you can see, are identified during the works. A given client or a refurbished zone has its marking, and certain areas which were disassembled or are sensitive to contamination, whether it's certain components or elements, are assigned as specially supervised, and they're labeled particularly, they're counted, and all the elements and components, so nothing stays in the turbine or in the fragment of the installation. So everything has to be traced and monitored. On a specific example, coming to the end of my presentation, when we were implementing an earlier technology for a power plant, one of the clients from the Ukraine came to us with an issue or problem that they don't know or have a difficulty in cleaning a fragment of a piping between the steam generator and and let's say there was a pocket, compensation pocket, which was gathering all the waste. There was a pocket of approximately 1,000, the 10 centimeters of material, and strongly pressurized by temperature and pressure. So the drop here that we can see on the right photo started to crack, but there was no way to verify whether this was there was a lot of sludge, a lot of in the piping, a lot of contamination. So we, as technologists, worked out a technology together with the manufacturer of the steam generator and with the power plant and the Russian generator, how to introduce a cleaning device so that it's safe to humans, because this was a radioactive part of the system, and also safe to the actual equipment. So tests, models, and analysis, our analysis, the client's analysis, and the client liked the solution. On the left side here we can see photos how they saw these contamination in different parts, and then what it looked like after cleaning from us with an endoscopic solution and ultrasound, which are allowed for the inspection. So after these attempts, the client, we also worked in steam generator in Mobilnik, and the technology to adapt that was possible, both in the Ukraine and then in the Dukovany in the Czech Republic, in Czechia, and there will be a standard procedure of quality of the steam generator. So this is something which will be the specificity of the nuclear sector, both the client and the synergy to gain trust, mutual trust, and then to be able to translate that into success. So we have a lot of projects of this type, and turbo pumps, other oil systems, power supply, water supply systems, and preliminary facilities. So this level of trust is increasing, and is something fascinating because it carries new challenges and new areas of development. So summarizing, at various phases of whether building components delivered to the power plant and later, it's possible we are an example of that. We are happy that these kind of works have been able to be introduced. Entering to the sector is quite difficult. It's you can't just knock on the door and easily get in. This requires also you need to well identify the CAD, who is the deciding party, how to enter the sector. And a mistake that we made in the beginning, but we were able to overcome, is that we managed to respect that, not to respect the weightiness and the gravitas of working in the nuclear sector. Actually, we either will adapt to the rules and bring something positive to this, of course, persuade the client to our approach, but it's holy, basically, and sacred. But thanks to that, we also feel safer. Even myself, as a citizen, as a human being, being in many power plants and seeing how procedures are conducted, I feel safe. If generally society, broadly understood, what the approach is, then I think that all of us would be more keen to having a power plant built in Poland. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I've brought closer the prospects of a service company in the nuclear sector. And also, I'm waiting for those projects to show up in Poland because I believe that we will have also our participation in those projects. For those of you who would like to have contact with our teams, the Polish, American, and Czech, we have the links to the emails. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you so very much, Mr. President. And then that was a very interesting, detailed, and full of example presentation. Unfortunately, we didn't see the presentation, but I understand that the President will speak about the presentation, and the presentation will be made available. Oh, it's too bad because I was sure that you can see the presentation. Actually, we didn't want to interrupt you because I saw the presentation, I saw it from my desktop, but please believe me that we were all listening keenly and not even seeing the presentation. We benefited greatly because I put a lot of effort into the presentation to be good visually, and let's treat this as just a small stumble. The presentation, I think, can be used because we as a chamber want to support Polish companies, experienced companies such as your company, which participate in nuclear projects. And I think that these experiences will be invaluable also to the ministry. We have a representative of the ministry with us present here, and these types of presentations should be presented to other Polish companies to show them what the path is to achieve the position where you are in, and it's not that simple. So the appropriate preparation and timing will be very key. Personally, I'm very impressed, and I heard comments also of individuals present who have the identical opinion. So thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for that presentation. This was the last presentation of today, and